Good morning, guys. Welcome to another edition of Texans Unfiltered, a Houston football podcast for your Houston Texans. I'm YoungAriGold. I hope you guys are having a great week and enjoying all of the second interview announcements that have come out yesterday and Monday. It's interesting where the Texans are at. You have to wonder, kind of where they're at as far as in the process and what they're thinking. I'll say this: when it comes to interviewing candidates, NFL, corporate world, whatever it may be, it's always good to do your due diligence. And if you feel like a candidate is good enough for the second interview, move them through the pipeline. You want to move them through the pipeline and get have another conversation to really see if there's anything you missed in the previous interview. Maybe they impress you heavily in the first interview, and then they impress you more in the second interview, and really uh, are looked at as a potential candidate for the opening spot. So I like what the Houston Texans are doing right now. They are going through every process. They're turning over every stone. They're not ruling anything out, and they are just doing their due diligence. They are going through the process without, do they have a top candidate identified? I'm sure they do. Jonathan Gannon has interviewed for the role 3 times so far in the last 2 years. So there's a reason why he's getting the amount of interviews he is. But it's still good. Oftentimes when hiring, you have an ideal candidate, but there are times where another candidate will come through and blow your socks off, and you end up going with that candidate. And that's why when you're hiring, you kind of go in without a bias. You go in with the understanding that you want to learn from the candidate and really give them a fair shot. And it looks like that's exactly what the Houston Texans, Cal McNair, Hannah McNair, and Nick Caserio are doing right now. They're ensuring that they're doing everything they can to make the right decision for the Houston Texans moving forward. And I applaud them for going through this process. The way that they're handling it is perfect. It's how you hire. You can't eliminate anybody. Just go through. Let's see. It looks like Sean Payton is likely out of the running, which thank God. I was not a fan. If he really wanted the Texans job, I think that he would push a little bit more as well. But there's been no announcement of a second interview. I don't expect there to be an announcement for a second interview. I think it was the first interview was really just a pulse check, see where Sean Payton is, see where he is wanting to go, what direction he's wanting to take an organization, where he is from a personal, like emotional and physical investment perspective on tenure and how long he would potentially be in the job. And it looks like that was really they were just kicking the tires on Sean Payton, which nothing wrong with that. You want to hit every candidate you can, which is exactly what the Texans have done this entire process. They've interviewed every candidate that I think anybody would have wanted them to interview. And and even some that nobody else has interviewed, like Thomas Brown from the Los Angeles Rams. So Texans are doing a really good job right now. They're doing everything they can to make sure that this process is, one, transparent to the fan base, which is huge. Cal said that that's how it would be. Nick said that's how it will be, and they've held up their end of the bargain on that one. And they're just continuing to go through it, and they're checking in on their candidates to ensure that this is going to align, and that they're making the best decision possible for the Houston Texans organization moving forward. And it's exciting, it's refreshing, and I know we were on this path last year with some of the names that we interviewed, but this year is just totally different. I mean, they're really just out there interviewing anybody and everybody, and you're not seeing a Hines Ward, you're not seeing a Josh McCown. You're looking at successful coordinators, a successful head coach in the past with Sean Payton, and they're just turning over every stone. So I applaud them. So this week they have Mike Kafka's second interview. I believe that is today, and then Ejiro, the defensive coordinator from the Denver Broncos, also this week, maybe today as well. And so they announced that Monday and Tuesday. They're ensuring that those two, Mike Kafka is an interesting candidate because he's a football nerd, been in the league for a while, on the chief staff for quite some time, Andy Reid tree, which is an interesting tree to pull from. I believe outside of Doug Peterson, there's really not another Andy Reid coach that comes from the Andy Reid tree that's been as successful. But uh, Kafka seems to be a little bit different as far as where he came from and how he rise through the ranks. But really like Mike Kafka. And then Ejiro had a good season with Denver. They have a great defense. Nathaniel Hackett was just absolutely dumpster juice, and that was something that they couldn't overcome. But he's had other interviews as well, so it's interesting to see where the Texans are at right now and what they're doing. I posed a question, and in the title of the video, are the Texans going? Are they willing to wait for their candidate, right? And I say that because I think it's pretty clear that Jonathan Gannon or D'Amico Ryans are probably the top candidates right now, but they can't interview, or even Shane Steichen. They can't interview either any of those candidates until next week. So right now, it seems like they're just going through and interviewing who they can. It doesn't mean that those candidates aren't actually, at the top of the list. It just means that, we don't know where things rank. We can only go based off of what we're seeing from the media and what we're seeing on social media and things as such. But it looks like from everything we've heard and read that D'Amico and Jonathan Gannon are the top candidates. And I would assume the Texans will wait. There's really no rush in this process, or there's no need to rush in this process. They can take all the time they want. Sunday's game with Philly versus San Francisco is going to be an interesting one. Every Texans fan should be glued to their TV as you're getting a look at, the candidates that the Texans are interested in, and you'll be able to see who is it that kind of overcomes and takes that top spot from a performance perspective. Doesn't matter. Doesn't always mean that that's going to be the top candidate for the Texans. Just because, let's say D'Amico goes in and blows out, holds the Philadelphia Eagles offense to 7 points, and there's a blowout. Does D'Amico rise? I would assume he definitely gets some more points, but I think they've already identified who their top candidates are. And I think that just kind of is the icing on the cake at that point. But I would assume the Texans will be patient. They're going to go through these two interviews today. They'll request second interviews next week for Steichen, Gannon, and D'Amico Ryans, and then we should be, by the Super Bowl, we should have head coaches hired, and we'll know exactly, or a head coach hired, we'll know exactly who it is, and then the fun begins. That's when we start to dig into scheme. We get to defensive philosophy, offensive philosophy, and really get an understanding of the type of players specific to their offense or defense or both, and look at free agents, then look at the draft, and really be able to see, kind of put together some of the pieces to understand where the Texans are going and what we should be looking for in the offseason. So interesting stuff. It's always good right now. It's all good right now. It's nice to see that, really the Texans are in good light, and it's been a while since the Texans have been in good light, and it's very refreshing to be a part of. Other news was yesterday, I believe there was a report on ESPN that executives around the league expect Derek Carr to be a Houston Texan. Nick Caserio and the GM over in Las Vegas have a past. They've done some trades in the past. They have a relationship, and they're saying that Derek Carr would be a quarterback that Nick Caserio would target in the offseason. Now, it's funny because for it to be in the offseason, it's going to happen sooner rather than later. February 15th, I believe, if a trade is going to happen, it needs to happen by the 15th, or else there's something with Derek Carr's contract to where it becomes fully guaranteed, or something of that such. So the Raiders are going to move quick. And it's interesting to hear executives say that. Obviously his brother has ties here, first pick ever in Texans history, or first number one pick ever in Texans history. And, obviously not a ton of success. Not a lot of it's his fault. Offensive line was, the worst in maybe the NFL history based on the amount of sacks and times he got hit. But Derek Carr coming here and, potentially stepping into that starting quarterback position and doing something that his brother wasn't able to do. The story kind of writes itself. I'm not sure if that's where Nick would want to go, but if he does take or if he does take Derek Carr, does that mean he's punting on a quarterback in this year's draft? It does kind of open things up to how you're able to look at this draft and what Nick could potentially add to the roster. At two, you're pretty much guaranteed to have your choice of at least one of Will Anderson or Jalen Carter. And you'll have your choice of quarterbacks as well. So if Derek Carr does come here, could you see Nick Caserio still taking a quarterback? I really can't see that happening. I think that he'll use all his picks to really add talent to the roster. Also, got to keep in mind, once this head coach comes in, it's going to be about their philosophy and thoughts on the quarterback position and things of that nature as well. You do have to question though, with D'Amico Ryans being from Alabama or going to Alabama, is he tied to Bryce Young? And I think a lot. I haven't seen that floated around much, but I would assume that there's got to be some interest from D'Amico when it comes to Bryce. And he has a relationship with Nick Saban. Obviously, Nick has a relationship with Nick Saban as well, and Bill O'Brien, and others on that Alabama coaching staff. But it's an interesting time because D'Amico, went to Alabama. Bryce is coming from Alabama. Texans need a quarterback. D'Amico could be the new head coach. Lots of moving pieces, and it's interesting to watch. It's gonna be a ton of fun. There's lots of different scenarios this could go, but the Texans are in a good spot. I can see Derek Carr coming here, but if I see Derek Carr coming here, I automatically assume the Texans are not drafting a quarterback in the first round. I can't see it. Especially with the type of money that Derek Carr is likely to garner. Is he going to be in the $45 million range? I wouldn't think so. I would assume maybe anywhere from the 25 to 35. But like that mid tier of quarterback really hasn't been a thing recently. The salaries for quarterbacks have just gone up over the years, and it's a quarterback driven league. There's not a lot of teams that have their franchise guy, and I would assume that if Nick did want Derek, he would have to pay him anywhere from 25 to $35 million. But, also from a trade compensation perspective, I don't expect it to be a heavy price. The leverage is all in Derek Carr's hands right now. He has no trade clause. He can determine where he goes. He could determine if he doesn't go anywhere. He could say, I'm not going anywhere. And then come the 15th, he'll either need to be cut or if he's held on to that salary, I believe becomes guaranteed. So he has all the leverage he needs to be able to go where he wants. Based on what Derek has said, he wants to go to a winning organization with a head coach that's been there for a while, doesn't really want to be a part of a rebuild. And, this Texans team is in that position of, in a rebuild, and it'll be a new head coach, it'll be a new staff. So I don't know if Derek would be interested in going here. If he wants to win, the opportunity to do so is Carolina, New Orleans, the Jets, Dolphins, Tampa Bay. There's plenty of options for him that would be better than the Houston Texans. So we'll just have to wait and see how things go. But I'm not opposed to it. I think that it would make an entertaining 2023 season. Yeah, Texas fans wouldn't get their first round quarterback, maybe, and maybe they do. But the team would be more entertaining. They would have an opportunity to win some games, and then they'd have an opportunity to add a lot more talent to other parts of the roster without taking a quarterback and using that second pick on another position. So, or trading back and getting more picks. So there's 92 scenarios right now. Nobody's going to know what those scenarios are until I guess February 15th will be the first domino to fall. And then from there, you'll be able to have an understanding on what things are, where things are going to go and how things are going to happen. But it's interesting. It's an interesting time. Lots of moving pieces and always fun. F5 day every day until, OTA and training camp. So everybody will be refreshing Twitter and Facebook and Reddit and all of those social media sites to get the most up-to-date news. But yeah. All right. Well, with that being said, I have nothing else for this morning. I hope you guys all have a great week. Make sure you guys like and subscribe to the video. Make sure you like and subscribe to the channel. Make sure you tell your friends and your friends' friends tell a friend about Texans Unfiltered on YouTube. Tell them about the podcast on all podcast platforms. Make sure you guys go follow us on Twitter. Go to the Facebook page, like it, share it, tell your friends to tell a friend again. And we appreciate everything that you guys have done and supported us over the years, and we're going to continue to build this out. And with that being said, I'm YoungAriGold signing off. We'll catch you guys next week.